Sponsored by the Big 98, Nashville's #1 for new country and the home of the Bobby Bones Show.
We're so pleased to have on the show a guitarist and also a founding member of the band Firefall, Jock Bartley. Jock, thanks for coming on the show.
Thanks for having me. I'm glad we got this together.
Me too. So the band Firefall, obviously a huge number of hits, still touring, and you're kind of leading this going on now with the new album, Friends and Family. And so listening to the tracks, you know, these are a lot of the bands that Firefall has toured with over the years, right?
Right. The concept on this album was the original members of Firefall. A lot of us played in other famous bands.
Right.
Like the Byrds or the Flying Burrito Brothers or Spirit or Dan Fogelberg or Hart or Graham Parsons in my case. And you know, and our manager said, why don't you guys do an album of just those songs? And as soon as he said that, I went, wow, how about we expand that? And in 1976, when our first album hit really big,
right,
we toured with Fleetwood Mac, the Doobie Brothers, Loggins and Messina, the band with Lee Von Hellman and Robbie Robertson.
Oh, yeah.
Leonard Skinner, Marshall Tucker. I said, let's do a song of theirs too. And Lynn said, that's great. So the concept is bands that we either, the Firefall members were either in, played with, or we got to be really good friends with out on the road. And for me, as leader of the band now and producer of this album, it was just so much fun to, and really kind of difficult to pick the songs.
Right.
Like,
that's what I was wondering.
Which Doobie Brothers song are we going to do? Or which Heart song are we going to do? You know, there was and in fact, just to give you an example, we had to be real careful. Our manager said, wow, you toured with the band? Yay, you guys can do Up on Cripple Creek. And I went, no friggin' way. You know, Lee Von Helm is the only guy that should ever sing,
right,
Up on Cripple Creek.
Yep.
And for instance, our brand new bass player, lead singer, John Bisaha, said, I could really sing What About Love great. And I went, really? Okay, you're on, baby. So picking each song, some were easy, some were really difficult. But the whole premise on this thing was we did loving, respectful, and honored these bands and these songs. Right. And also bigger, we wanted to honor the late 60s and the 70s where the music in America was just fantastic.
Totally. Well, and I think that the interpretations, listening to the entire album, Jock, to where it's definitely has the Cinderella feel to it, that Firefall brought with songs like Cinderella and Strange Way and everything, to where, it's not like you're trying to cover them. You know what I mean? Like
right.
Trainer Running and things like that from Doobie Brothers, and these songs that you chose, and the song by Spirit even, and Graham Parsons, you're doing your own interpretations with looking through the Firefall window, wouldn't you say?
Right. Well, yeah, that's true. Now, I've been asked in other interviews, if we deliberately tried to sound like the songs. And for instance, on Part of the Plan by Dan Fogelberg,
right,
we kept it really close to the vest. And I, as lead guitar player, I love Dan's solo on his original, and I basically copied his solo, which was so good, And so even if Firefall, did the Fogelberg song, it wouldn't sound like the original because we have a different singer, different studios, different guitar sounds, different time. And yet then on the Doobie Brothers song, Long Train Running, that guitar lick that Tommy Johnson played on the original, that's signature Doobie all the way.
Totally.
And I kind of, when I was listening to that song, the other second guitar part was in there too. So I wanted to feature the other guitar part and maybe lessen the signature Doobie guitar part, even though it's still in there. And we added sax and, so yeah, some of these songs sound quite a bit different, but I think we kept true to the original.
I think you did too, and it's such a nice nod, especially when you look at, like you mentioned, to where so many members of Firefall came out of multiple bands. And I've got to bring this up about yourself. I mean, obviously, jumping into the band ZEPHYR, filling Tommy Bolin's shoes as a young man, not the easiest position to fill there, Jock.
It wasn't. Now, it was interesting. So I saw Tommy's first gig with ZEPHYR when he came in from South Dakota and breezed into town as the hot shot guitar player. And it was amazing. And the interaction and the kind of battling on stage between Candy Givens, the lead singer, and Tommy, the lead guitar player, that's what they were. They were so energetic. And at that point in my career, I was really trying to just play tasty and play the right thing for the song and stand back by my amp and make sure I played good. And I wasn't really performing much. And when I replaced Tommy, when they hired me to replace Tommy, obviously huge shoes to fill as the lead guitar player. You know, I remember the first gig we played, Candy was like looking around, where's my guitar player? You know, come on out and challenge me. You know, that's what we do. And I hadn't really become a performer then yet, you know, and in a musician's career, there's a point to where, you know, you're kind of just playing good and you're doing what you do on stage. And then all of a sudden, when you feel really comfortable with the licks and stuff and the parts that you're playing and comfortable and confident of the band, that's when you start moving around. And, you know, and that was before I joined ZEPHYR. So I wasn't a real performer, and they kind of, you know, I think musically I fit in and replaced Tommy okay, but on stage and performing wise, no way.
But also, Jock, part of the growth, I mean, that prepared you then, you know, going into Graham Parsons' band, which you went into afterwards, you know, working with Emmylou Harris and everything. It's like, you know, it's interesting looking at your career as an artist, you know, what led you to the creation of Firefall. Yeah, exactly. When you look at ZEPHYR and then, you know, with Graham Parsons' band and then into the Flying Burrito Brothers and all these things to where it's like, and then, you know, the culmination of Firefall.
It was interesting, you know, and falling into Graham Parsons' band, I was not a country picker. I was a lead guitar player from Boulder that was a rock guy.
Right.
But I was better than the guy that they had hired sight unseen for their first gig. And I got hired that first gig to go with them for the rest of the tour. And I was in the bus bouncing around with the late great Neil Flans on steel. He was trying to drop the record on the bus with us bouncing around in the bus so I could learn James Burton's licks. And I'm going, okay, there it is. I'm going to try to learn it. And the cool thing about, I'll tell you what, our first gig with Graham and Emmylou and the Fallen Angels was in Armadillo headquarters in Austin, which was a world famous place. Our second gig was in Liberty Hall in Houston, where we played a couple of days. And the last gig of that stand for us, we're playing on stage, and onto the stage walks Neil Young and Linda Ronstadt. And I remember distinctly thinking, oh, you know, I was painting apartments in my apartment building to pay rent in Boulder 4 days earlier, you know, and trying to get in a band. And suddenly I'm on stage with Linda Ronstadt and Neil Young. And it was the first time that Emmylou Harris and Linda Ronstadt ever met or sang together. And after our show, Neil said, hey, everybody come back to my hotel room. I got a great suite. And so three bands, Neil Young's band, Linda Ronstadt's band, and Graham Parsons' band, all went back to Neil's hotel suite. So Graham Parsons, like he was wont to do, he grabbed a guitar of Neil Young's and just started playing like 25 country songs. Graham was like always the center of attention. And, you know, and the amazing thing is that Linda Ronstadt and Emmylou Harris sat fairly near him, their faces about 6 inches apart from each other, and blended their voices for the very first time. And it was And all of us watching knew it was, first of all, it was really magical. You know, two of the best female vocalists going to sing together for the first time. But we all knew this was historic. It was like, wow. You know, I mean, Graham Parsons, Emmylou Harris, Linda Ronstadt, man, it was a highlight of my young career. And later in that tour is where I met Rick Roberts, who replaced Graham Parsons in the Flying Burrito Brothers. And in fact, Rick Roberts, after a Burrito Brothers show in Washington, D.C., heard about a great female singer playing down the street in a little club. And he went and heard Emmylou Harris and basically discovered her.
I thought it was so interesting also with Chris Hillman, to where he produced Firefall's album in 1976, correct? I mean, the band was
our demo tape.
Your demo tape, yes.
That got us our record deal.
Well, and I got to bring this up too, Jock, to where it's hard to believe, but you know, with Firefall forming back in 1974 originally, you're coming up on 60 years, you know, of Firefall. and you just have this new album out, which I think is incredible. I enjoy all the tracks on here, and also the history of knowing the intertwining, you know, of the bands, the musicians, and Firefall. And you're saying, you know, before we started the interview, that now there's already talk of a volume 2.
So Lynn said to me, you know, many months ago, you know, this idea, and you guys did such a great album, let's do a volume 2. And when he said that, I went, okay.
With Friends and Family, you know, it's such a great album, and I think it's going to do so well for Firefall, and certainly with the singles, the full album. But I got to bring this up. I mean, you're going to have big touring plans, you know, for the rest of 2023 and into 2024. Anything special for the 60th anniversary?
Well, we're about to get our 50th. So, you know, we formed in 1974.
Right.
So that's 2024
you're
for
right.
50.
Right.
Now, our first album came out in 76. So I'm wondering, well, should we do the 50th anniversary on 76 or on 74?
Right. No, you're right. The 50th. I think I'd go with the 74. That was the founding.
Yeah, it was. And it was a real magical thing.
It's just incredible. And I can't believe 50 years, you know, coming up next year. And once again, too, incredible album with Friends and Family by Firefall. I want to make sure, Jock, for our viewers, website, social media, everything for Firefall, with all the great new music and everything that you guys have coming out and more touring. Where should our viewers go?
The website is firefallofficial.com.
When I think of Firefall, and I certainly still listen to, you know, all of your hits and everything, so well done. But it's like, but those were the contemporaries at the time that were your friends. You guys played in the bands, you toured with them. I mean, it's such a neat intertwine. The backstory to me is what really helps make this album and the songs behind it, Jock.
I learned early on when I was like 10 or 12 or 13 years old that everything you play needs to make the song better.
Which I think Firefall has always done with all of you. And I think, once again, you've done that with the new album, Friends and Family. Jock, I can't wait to see you guys on tour and see which guitars you pull out of the vault. Jock Bartley of Firefall, thank you so much for coming on the show.
My pleasure. Thank you, sir.
Sponsored by the Big 98, Nashville's #1 for new country and the home of the Bobby Bones Show.